Everyone, welcome to Psyched, and it's time to get psyched every Wednesday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. We've got a guest from Thailand, so it's morning for him today. Andrea Chu and myself, we get you guys psyched. It's a show where we talk about different experiments that were conducted, psychological or psychology experiments that were conducted, and we talk about the effect of how it applies in the workplace. So we talked about the Stanford Prison experiment, we talked about 10 milligrams experiment, and we talked about many, I don't know how many experiments we've been talking about, right? And today we talk about an experiment actually that triggered what we call industrial psychology, right? I mean, essentially, if you think about how psychology in the workplace began, it had to really start from this guy, Elton Mayo, his experiment, and he's not even, he's was in America at that point in time, but he wasn't really an American. He's an Australian, right? A sociologist, not even a psychologist, right? Who was actually at the Hawthorne plant at the Western Electric Company, not the General Electric Company, the Western Electric Company, and he did a simple experiment, right? Andrea, he basically said, and he was not even looking at what actually the experiment. We'll talk a little bit about what the Hawthorne Effect is, but he was actually looking at working conditions on productivity. Right. So lighting, when he increased lighting, then he observed that productivity increased. And when he did a couple other tweaks in the workplace, he saw that productivity increased. He changed the working hours, the rest breaks. He offered food during breaks. And each of these small little changes drove productivity up. And remember, this was in 1932. So this was the Great Depression in the US. So there were a lot of variables that later, and we'll talk a little bit, and we'll bring our guests in to talk a little bit about the people who say no, that's not true, because Mayo kind of established that it wasn't at the end of the day, right? The increase in productivity was not really about the changes, because a couple of months later he took away all the changes, but productivity still remained relatively high. So he came on and established that it wasn't the changes, but it was because the workers were valued, they were taken care of, they were concerned about the workplace, and they had opportunities to be listened and to be heard, and this drove productivity. And this theory is been termed the Horton Effect. So we're going to talk about the Horton Effect and how exciting it is. And I see some guests joining in. Feel free as always to ask your questions in the comment section. Andrea, tell us a bit. Are we going to maybe we should Andrea? Should we watch something about the Horton Effect, or you want to say something first?
Okay, Ken, I think it's very interesting. I used to believe that people never studied productivity until much later. So I'm very surprised that the Horton studies were done in 1920s, right? So if you think about it, ever since then, all our employers want us to be is productive, effective, make more money, be better employees and stuff like that. So that's very interesting to me. I think I just want to ask a question for those who are tuning in. What do you think Hawthorne Effect is? So if you can just type in the comments, what are your thoughts are? If you've heard of it, if you've not heard of it, just let us know so we can also see, do actually people know what Hawthorne Effect is? All right. Yeah. So I think while that is coming in, we'd like to show you a very, very, very old video of actually the 1920s where the Hawthorne studies actually were conducted. Sashi, can you show us that video while we wait for the comments to flow in? Thank you.
All right.
At Western
the Hawthorne Effect.
Hawthorne Works in Chicago in the 1920s, telephone equipment was being manufactured by 40,000 people. What Hawthorne employees had received their company-paid pension plan back in 1906. They had vacations 1 week after 5 years, and they had sickness disability pay. Hawthorne was considered a progressive place to work.
Those who worked at Hawthorne really respected in the neighborhood. It was considered quite a privilege to be working here.
At this and 3 other companies in 1924, the National Academy of Science began an experiment to determine how illumination affects worker efficiency. The premise was that output would improve if the lighting of work areas was improved. Something very curious happened when new experimental lights were installed. Output went up among those employees being studied, and also among those whose lighting had not been changed. And most puzzling of all, it continued to go up even when lights were turned down. Having proved nothing, These studies were called off by the National Academy. It might all have ended there. Relay making was picked for a new experiment when Western Electric alone decided to probe the inconclusive results of the illumination studies. 6 young women assembled the electromagnetic switches while rest breaks and different hours were tried. It was the core of what would later be called the Hawthorne studies, industry's first scientific inquiry into employee attitudes. Continuing changes in routine were freely discussed with the workers, whose output as well as involvement in the project increased dramatically. Each completed relay was counted by a tireless tape, which recorded an overall production increase of 30%. In this small room for more than 5 years, observers studied workers producing more in less time than ever before. Industrial history was in the making.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And that is
So-
the video in 1920s.
and you know, I see a couple of people are saying, you know, Sharina, Daniel, who says it's altering your behavior in response to the realization that you're being observed. And that's something, you know, essentially what the Hawthorne Effect is, right? I mean, essentially when you're observed, you behave very differently. And it has, and I guess there's a lot more research being done over the last 70, 80 years, which has replicated this study in many different permutations. And I think to bring in, you know, today we've got a fantastic guest who's joining us. And of course, let's see, there's another comment. I initially thought it was about adding some difficulty to a task, taunts. Okay, so that's a comedian here we have in our midst. But we have a fantastic guest. I mean, Andrea, tell us a bit about Patrick Bensen, who's been joining us shortly.
Okay, all right. So Patrick Bensen, he's currently in Thailand joining us from over there. He is an organizational psychologist. You know, he talks about change management, learning and training development, anything to do with psychology and the workplace. He's the person to go to, right? And
he's
he is
faculty of
currently-
Leaderonomics also. So, I
Yes,
mean, he teaches for us, I think. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Yes. Yeah, I was supposed to say that at the end, but yes, he has just joined us as a faculty, so we're excited to have him on board. And he's also part of something called Leaders of Tomorrow Institute, right? So he does it all his trainings across the world, not just in Thailand. He's just staying in Thailand, and he just showed us his backyard with a lot of banana plants and a lot of birds, which is amazing. So we will welcome him in a bit, you know, while he gives us some insights on what the workplace is like for tomorrow.
But what? Sorry.
Yes, but we're going to talk a bit more about why, you know, Horton Effect tells us that, you know, currently the way workplaces are engaging with their people or measuring their performance is not a true reflection, right? So we're going to include him in our conversation after this, and I have a lot of questions for him on what we can expect, and we will move into that in a bit. So Roshan, do you have anything else to say about the Horton Effect before we go?
I think it's going to be a very interesting dialogue, Rob, because I think if you think about industrial psychology, right? I mean, it started in the 20s. Actually, Henry Ford was another big guy who really studied productivity. And then in the 70s, you saw what Intel did with OKRs and driving productivity through the roof. And I think today, it's a norm, right? Industrial psychology, or what we call organizational psych, is a norm. And today we talk a lot about employee engagement. And I think really the Hawthorne Effect was a precursor to what we call employee engagement of today. So I'm looking forward to listening to Patrick and you, Andrea. So shall we get the master psychologist himself, Patrick? Welcome to the show. Really super glad to have you with us.
Same thing.
Patrick.
Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And I think the first question I have for you is, what do you think the future of the workforce would look like? Especially, with all this pandemic and all that. What are your insights on that?
Wow. Start with a very deep question. The future, I'm not psychic, as I say, I'm just a psychologist. So I don't see the future with my, but there is some sign that, an observation I've been doing, especially since the pandemic. So I think the future will be a combination of remote and on-site work, like an hybrid. Exactly. I compare what's happening with the work that was happening with our cars and vehicles. We know we're all going electric. We could have done that a long time ago, but for 20 years, we have hybrid car that is partly electric, partly combustion, and then eventually we go fantastic electric. Why the 20 years in between? because the market was not ready, because all the industry that sells us the petrol was not ready. So likewise, I think the people are more ready to take care of themselves and be remote. They have been ready for a long time. I think the industry is not ready to let them go. So the hybrid part will be for the industry to adapt, not for the people to adapt. But some people will adapt more or less. Of course, we all have different adaptability. But in concrete example, the big five big company of in the Silicon Valley, Google, Amazon, Apple, just told the employee that they could stay remote indefinitely. Now, if you know you live in San Francisco and you have to be there because you have to go to work every morning, 3 hours to go, 3 hours to come back, 6 hours in a queue, plus all the accidents and all this time wasted and things. If you don't have to go there ever, would you like to stay 5 miles away from where you live or where you work in an overpriced city if you never have to come back there? So what happened in January 2020, those engineers start packing the family, packing themselves and go to Bali, go to somewhere else where they don't have to pay that much. And since they don't have to go back to work, and then what happened 6 months later, they call them back, say, sorry, we made a mistake, we should go back. The company was not ready, but the people were doing well for the last 6 months or more. So the transition is this. So the future of work is a place where, after centuries of chasing the work, we, the employee, chase the work. Now is the time where the employers will chase the employee at the beach. That's called talent acquisition.
Yeah.
And that's what it's for. They're here to find the talent wherever they are. It's also a time for the politician that all the immigration things, bring the wall between Mexico and things, all this is gone because you don't have to be physically in the United States to work for any United States company anymore. So forget the green card, forget the immigration, forget the passport, forget all that. So all the things have been in place. It's hard for them because they believe so hard and so long. Same thing with the workplace, from Henry Ford or terrorism. They believe so much, and that's what we've been doing for more than 100 years. And suddenly the things change. The change was ready for the people. The industry was not ready. Like the planet is ready for electric. We're ready for it. I'm ready for electric. Where is my offer? So it's that. I think that, but it's a good thing. It's a good news. It's time, evolution. If you don't change, then you die. Yeah. Life is movement by definition. You cannot stay still.
Movement is life.
Movement is life. And it begins when we decide so.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because a lot of companies are moving completely to remote work and they are really open to that, right? But at the same time, employers are facing this issue with making sure the employees are productive, right? And that's where the question comes from, especially with the virtual world. How do we get that true sentiment of whether the employees are productive in the first place, and how do we improve that? What are your thoughts on this?
This is a question in psychology. What they refer to is trust. And the workplace was never a place of trust to begin with. Okay? I mean, the way we've been doing since terrorism is not a place of trust. You have to come in the morning and you have to put this card with holes to know what time exactly you're in and what time you leave and what time you think. Because I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. That's what it means. I don't trust you can come anytime and do the same work. I don't trust you. I pay you, and the minute I pay you from that moment. And so I need to be sure that you check in and you check out. Trust was never built. And now, entirely is built on trust. Now, trust is not something you can build within 5 minutes. Before trust, there's 5 levels in all human relationship. And the first level is respect. Okay? And then you go to caring. And then you go to trust. When you got those 3, you have a friends. You respect your friends, you care for your friends, and you trust your friends. That bundle called friendship. Now, for most employees, they not even pass the first thing. There's no respect. I watched today a video that leaked from Air Asia, or one of the Asian, one of these Asian carrier. And it was their internal meeting, and one was repeatedly say shut up to one of the other employee completely. So they have no respect to start with. Caring, They don't care if you have no respect. And then trust. So they say, okay, we need to trust you. How would you trust you? It's not a magic button you press. It's built. When you have a friend, and if I want to be friend with you, Andrea, I just met you today. I cannot say you're my friend. That would be a lie. Mm-hmm. But if we do talk, if we meet, if we go for coffee and then we maybe, we exchange, we make a living, and in 10 years, then I can say, yes, Andrea is my friend. But not today. So from a perspective of non-trusting your employee to a perspective they're no longer there, I can no longer check them. I don't know what time they start. I don't know what time they do. I don't know if they really work. And since I never trust them, the real question they ask is not, how can I trust you? It's how can I put a camera in your bedroom to see what you're doing? That's what they want. And that would be an infringement of privacy, okay? Where people are fighting against it. So, and you cannot do that. And even if you could, would you really want to have a camera, your boss watching you, what time you go to the shower, what time you go to the bathroom, what time you go to eat, and do you want that? No. So what about trust? But then trust, it has to be built. And those managers, at MBA level, they talk about everything except trust.
Yeah, and so I think that's very interesting, because in Malaysia itself, some companies are actually using tracking systems on the laptops of their employees to make that. And I asked my friends, how do you live with that? They are super anxious all the time that they don't get work done. So productivity levels drops. They don't trust the employees. They're trying to look out, but they're so stressed. And it's horrible, right? To think that it's not going to help at all compared to actually having conversations with your employees. And I think coming back to the question, with the Horton Effect, which we, as you quoted us, right, dug from the archives of psychology. I really like that because it was in the 1920s. But basically, it says that when people are actually paying attention to you, giving you some sort of observance and stuff like that will increase productivity. But, so we've come a long way. We've come a long way, right, from 1920s. Now we don't observe anymore, but we build a relationship, like you mentioned, trust, right? So how... Sorry, go ahead.
About the Hawthorne experiment, they realized that whether they put more light or less light or even candlelight, the productivity increase. You know what they increase? With or more or less light is because as they couldn't see the employee, as the light decreased, they came closer to see if they were working. And so when you have your supervisor breathing in your neck, you work even harder. Nothing to do with the light. What happened is, like, what the thing didn't say is, like, they went closer as they couldn't see them from far away because the light was diminishing. They actually came closer to see what they were doing. And so they felt that presence of being observed, not because they were caring then, just for the sake of the experiment, like chicken. And so, yes, they increased the productivity because they thought they were in trouble. It's a false, it's a little bit like, I remember seeing a movie a long time ago, but it's exactly this. If I ask you what you did yesterday night in a gentle manner, you might say what you did yesterday night, okay? But if I do in the FBI style, if I come to you without saying anything, I slap you in the face 5 times, you fall on the floor, okay? I make you cry, and then I ask you, shouting at you, where were you yesterday? You don't know anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's not because you don't know anymore, it's because you're so shocked by the way I ask you that you forget, and so then you become more suspicious because you can't even tell me what you were doing. If I ask you normally, you would tell me quite easily. So experiments, that's why I become who I am. I'm not a clinic, I'm not what we call like a research psychologist. Mm-hmm. Research is limited to what the research is, and you can make those research talk the way you want. You observe 50, 100 people, and you say, the world have concluded the world. You mean 50 people. Yeah. 50 people in that environment, in that precise thing, in that, and you were only looking at those effects, not this effect. You didn't, so it's nice to have,
right? It's too controlled and it's not real.
Environment that you cannot make a conclusion out of it. Like from most research. And yes, you can repeat that research. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be all of my colleagues which are research psychologists. I understand it's easier to, when you finish your degree in psychology, to stay in the laboratory because it's clean, it's nice, you have a nice coffee machine, and then the colleagues are fantastic. And I like the little girl over there. Maybe I can date her later. I understand that. I understand better than what I choose to sit outside with the prostitutes and the drunken addicts. Sit in all night while it's stink, while it's not safe, and trying to understand how they see life. No one wants to do that at 3 a.m. I did. It's called applied psychology. And now what the world needs is real concrete things. Applied psychology. Now, wait a minute. 80% of psychologists in the world are not applied psychologists. They are research psychologists.
Yeah.
So they don't know. Well, we can make a research. We can measure, not stop measuring people. And tell me what thing, this trust thing, this environment, this is not something I measured. There's no way I can measure how friends we're going to become. Let's say we're friends, and I compare you with another friend. There's no one winning the race. We're just friends. There's no best friends, less than best friends, second position after best friend. It's not the Olympics here. We're friends or we're not friends. The definition is wide, it's not measurable, and it shouldn't be measured.
Yeah, and that's what humans are, right? We are so versatile. We are constantly evolving into something else. It's never going to be a person is A, B, and C, and they are going to be A, B, C forever, right? And I think I really like how you pointed it out that we have very few applied psychologists as well. And that's what the show is trying to do, right? Trying to apply whatever the research was done long time ago into experiments, into real life application, into workplaces, into personal life. And that's why we invited you here, because I think you are a great asset to the show. And coming back to your experiences, like you mentioned, you sat with drunk addicts, you sat with prostitutes, but I'm going to bring you back into the workplace, and I'm pretty sure you have observed so many things and communicated these insights with a lot of people. So when it comes to productivity and performance, what have you observed in the workplace that works?
What really works is like when people feel trusted. Okay, there's two things really that works. It's like they want to be involved in what they're doing. If they choose that company, chances are they want to make a difference. They want to be part of the difference. If they believe in that company, or the vision of the company, of what they call the culture of the company, then they want to be part of the culture, not wearing the lousy T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want. So they want to be involved. If there is a plan, let me know of the plan. I want to know where you go. Even if I don't participate, I want to know. I want to be part of a whole. What has been practiced so far was the army things. You stay outside and guard that hangar behind you. What's inside? Not your concern. How long shall we stay? We'll let you know when it's done. And then you stay in the rain, shooting with order to shoot. Everyone will come without knowing what is inside. We want to know now, the workplace is, and the young generation especially, they want to know what is inside the hangar and what's the plan. What we got in this thing? What is so important inside? Let me understand why I'm doing this. Then I don't mind staying in the rain. We were in things in a very vertical workplace where there's people that think and people that execute, and they don't talk to each other. So once those people decide what to do, they tell them to execute. And if they don't do it, they find somebody else that will. Now they want to be on a horizontal plan where they all want to hear what was the plan, even if their role is minor. It doesn't matter what they have to do. Even if they clean the floor, is fine. But they want to know the part of the whole plan. Not I clean the floor, I have no idea what they're doing. So that's one thing. And for that, you have to trust the people to share information. Now, what is for the people, for the employer? Well, a good idea is a good idea. It doesn't matter where it's come from. It's not because I pay you double that you have more idea or better idea. An idea is an idea, and it comes from whoever. So if I include all of my team, even the cleaner in my team, maybe the cleaner will have a fantastic idea that no one could see. And is it part of the team or not? Now, if you see that as a pirate ship, okay, it's a pirate ship, and they have people on board. Yeah, there's a captain, but there's also all kind of people on board. There's a cook, there's a thing. Now, we're passing through a storm. We need every man on board. not just the one that know how to make the helm, or to navigate or to the compass. We need everyone, because that ship cannot be steered by one man crew. We need everyone on board, and everyone can save your life. Now that is trust. And we on a pirate ship, it never was seen as an adventure ship. But I think the young generation wants to be, look, if I give me 3 or 4 years of my time in your company, what is in for me? Of course it's money, of course it's salary. That go with that saying. What else is in for me? And that company have not really thought about that so far, or very few have.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I think I can speak for the younger generation. It's really true, a lot of us, like for example, Shavina in a comment, she said it's really true. A sense of belonging is so important and motivates us to do more than just being an employee, right? Getting a salary, like you said, that it's a given. We do our job. That's pretty much it. And a lot of my colleagues, or rather the people in our age group, the younger generation, say that a lot of workplaces are manipulating this as well. Right? You go into workplaces, when you go for an interview, they tell you, yeah, we treat you as family, we welcome you, blah, 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 all these, empty promises that come along. And then when you go into there, they don't even say good morning, or they don't ask you how you're doing, which is crazy.
As a human being, every time someone too quickly say you're my best friend, I go away, because
it's a red flag, right?
because I know there was nothing inside to make that statement. So I cannot become your best friend overnight. And for the reason you call me your best friend, for the same reason you call me your enemy, because there was no reason to base your statement on. So it's built, and it takes time. Whether we like to go fast, whether you like to, technology, everything has to be immediate and press a button and I got it. This thing that doesn't change. This inside a grapefruit here is 7 years of evolution that doesn't go as fast as technology. And we have to accept that we have a brain, that's what make emotion and things, and we move at that pace. That pace should be this, no matter what the pace of the robots can do. You want to go faster, take a robot, but I'm a human, and take me as who I am. Don't want me to compete with a robot. AI is coming, as you know, and AI is coming to the workplace, and AI is the next tsunami, At the moment, the concern for WHO, the World Health Organization, is all this burnout at the workplace. People have been working harder since the pandemic. They were afraid of losing the job. See, you remember this Hawthorne Effect? As soon as they get unobserved, they were afraid to be on the list of, because companies were actually leaving some heavy weight behind it. They were afraid to be the next on the list, to be eliminated. So they work harder to prove that they need me. That's why they work harder. By doing so, and on computer, and on a setting that was not made properly for work, for most of them, they create burnout without any limit. And the burnout on the rise is being qualified by the WHO as the disease of the 21st century, not COVID. Burnout is. And it's killing more people than COVID altogether. If we could talk about that instead, people would be scared of the burnout, not of the COVID.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, even like right now, if you look at the statistics, a lot of people are leaving their jobs in the midst of a pandemic simply because they are burnt out. I mean, Malaysia itself, we have this phenomenon called Bendera Hitam, which is black flag, for doctors who are struggling with things, because the hospitals are really overworked, and a lot of doctors, even like specialists, they're all resigning at this point of time because of burnt out, and there's no support. And that's very, very, it's an eye-opening situation for us to see that if we don't take care of them now, they are sooner or later they're going to leave because they are feeling exhausted and you're overworking them and all these factors that play into part. And that's why, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, the trust, the belonging is so important. Not just at the end of the day, but right at the beginning. Like, Pancha says he totally agrees. He says that it's so important for companies to incite a sense of belonging to their employees. And we'll talk about a bit on the practical side, how do we apply this in a workplace with Roshan in a bit. I think to conclude this, I think it's very insightful to hear you speak about these issues that we face and, whatnot, and all these important things that people should be aware of, especially building that trust with the people around you, your employees as employers.
So,
And
as any relationship between two human beings, it takes two. You cannot, of course, you trust yourself. I hope you trust yourself, right?
yes.
So when what we're talking here is a trust with another human being that you might not know. Okay, you start with being polite, then caring, then trust, right? It's a mutual effect. You cannot be polite with someone that is rude to you. You cannot care for someone that doesn't care about you, and you cannot trust someone that doesn't trust you back. So it's a mutual relationship that it's a connection between two or many people, but let's say on a two level people, and it takes to give, right? It's how you trust someone. Well, you give an assignment, and then you say, well, I believe she can do it or he can do it, and then you return that trust, saying, oh yeah, they did a pretty good job. Then you trust more and you give more next time. It's trials and errors. You give and you receive, and you give and you receive. Both way. If you do that for me, you work for me, Andrea. If you do that for me this weekend, and I know I understand the weekend you're busy and you don't want to work in the weekend, that's your thing. But if you do that for me, there's something for you also. Then I give you something, time back, I give you more money, I give you something that deserve and that value you to the point that you really helped me out when I needed the most. Now it's my turn to return the favor. That's trust also. Mm-hmm. If not, it's an empty promise. And once we got this sense of belonging and this relationship reactivated, it's difficult. It's more difficult online. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. We from the evolution, we bound to people when we meet them. We need to touch. The touching has been disappearing in this digital world, but we are survived, and we're surviving still from the touch of our mother. I mean, we in the womb, and then we need to be touched as a baby, as a thing. We need to. That's what we ensure us. And suddenly, we're completely cut out of everybody else. And it seems we have all these friends, but they're all like behind the screen. We cannot hug if I hug my screen, it would be kind of weird. So, or kiss my screen, even worse. So, like, you can only do that. So at one point, we need to remember where we're coming from. And we cannot erase 7 years of evolution. We need that we ensure that, we need to feel human being around us. We need. Now, we don't need to do that when working. As long as we have like a social life outside where we can do that, we don't have to do it during the work time. We're quite flexible and we can adapt this thing. So working from home doesn't mean stay at home and never leave home. If you do that, then you go to burnout. Then you cut yourself out of everybody. So yes, it's possible to work from home, but as long as you have a social life, a real, not Facebook life, a social life. Okay?
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I mean, that's very insightful. And I really like the moment when you mentioned, if I hug a screen, it's really weird. I mean, in Leaderonomics, I'm a hugger, so I go and hug a lot of people in the office. And I miss that a lot, right? It's really sad. I can't wait to hug all my colleagues when we're back in the office, hopefully someday. And I think I will end this segment and pass it on to Roshan into application with one question that's coming from the comments. Sashi is asking, what happens to people who don't care about what's happening inside or the whole plan, but are really good at what they do? Could this be a problem, especially when it comes to adapting to change and foreseeing potential opportunities? This going back to what you mentioned about, people want to be involved in the whole plan. So what would you say to Sashi if he's asking this question?
Well, the question is like, how can you be good at something if you don't know what you're doing or what application or implication is going to have? Let's say you're an AI programmer in what they call now NLP, a natural language programmation, so the robot can understand us, okay? And you're good at developing that part. You're not curious to know how they're going to use this technology. Are you Einstein that discovered the atom, but then later on discovered that they used that to bomb the Japanese instead of doing electricity with it? Are you not curious to know, are you genius on how it's going to be used, for good or for bad. I used to say, like, when I was living in a cold country where there's a lot of snow, like in Canada, we have this snow shovel, and it says, you see, the person that created the snow shovel was really meant to help you to take the snow out of your driveway. But it's so sharp that you can also kill someone, decapitate someone if you but it was never meant as this. It's not a weapon. It's a shovel. It's a tool. But you can use it as a weapon if you want to. Now, I would be concerned that if you're good at something, you want to know what they're going to do with it. You should, from my perspective, and that's only my opinion here, I don't want to give a part of me without knowing what they're going to do with it. If they're going to take my idea and they're going to, for example, I give a very, very concrete example. The EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program. Some employers understood that if I give insight of how the employee think, they have a reason to fire them. I say, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you that insight. EAP is to assist the people to feel better, not to find something against them in order to fire them. So I refuse to work for this company because they want to use my insight of psychologist to go and ask all the things to fire that person. That's not psychology is all about. If you have a problem with your employee, fire him, but don't use me. Don't use my skills.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing thing, and an example, which is real life problems with also people who are going into organizations to help, and eventually they take those insights to do something negative on your insights and on your skills. So I think to answer Sashi's question, I think on my perspective as well, I think it is a problem when it comes to adapting to change and foreseeing potential, because you're so tunnel vision on what you're doing, and you don't care whether it's going to affect anybody and everybody else, right? And that makes you pretty much inhumane if you think about it. And I think there's another question. Yeah. And another question is coming from Reedy as well. She said that as the pandemic led us to lose our sense of control, social disconnects further amplifying the issue. And I'll pass this time to Roshan as you answer the question so we can transition into application to a real life workplace. Thank you so much, Patrick. Please.
Thank you.
Okay, Patrick. So I think just to quickly answer Reedy's question, what are your thoughts? The pandemic, I believe so, right? There's sense of, a lot of people have lost their sense of control. And we talked about this in one of our episodes. It's called Learn Helplessness, right? We are put in a box for so long. After a while, even though there's opportunity, even though the door is open and we can walk out, we sort of can't see the door because we've learned this helplessness, right? Maybe you can share your thoughts a little bit on that.
For sure that we're not meant to be isolated for too long from other people. And when it comes to control, I'm not sure exactly what the lady means about control. Is that controlling? It's true that on the workplace, for example, some people were good at finding by themselves what next to do. Some people are more like to be guided. So when the guide was away, when there was no direct connection every day, it's difficult to ring 5,000 employees every day to check out on them. That would be very, very demanding on HR. So what they do, they check once a week maybe. But then some people, it's too long time to be checked upon, and they might lose a sense of like, is that what I'm doing is good or any good? Shall I carry on more? Like, what about if I'm wrong? What about if it's not what they want? Shall I develop the whole thing? And in 1 week they tell me, oh no, it's not what I thought. So I need to know now, and some job also require a constant control to make sure that you're on the right pace, on the right page. So it's difficult to answer that question, but yes, we need to increase the communication as we lose the connection. So we have the human connection being away, but we need to increase that by whatever mean we have. Yeah, carry on.
Fantastic. Thanks, Patrick. And I want to go back to the Hawthorne Effect. We're talking about the Hawthorne Effect, and we know that whether it's work performance or variables like the lighting and other key issues, tweaks in the environment do make an impact. There is research to say that when you tweak the structure or you tweak a certain situation, the behavior is changed. And one of the things I think that's profound for me at least is that you mentioned this just now. It's about HR can't call up each employee every day and be talking to them. But I think one of the key lessons I learned from the Horton Effect was that listening is very important, right? Because when you listen, people feel, so it's not so much about the lighting, as you mentioned, it can be candles or can be whatever, right? Essentially, but if people felt they were listened to, people felt that they were engaged, right? Then you see productivity shoot up, because then they are committed, right? It's I'm committed to the cause because versus I'm just doing work because I'm paid to do work, right? So that's so to me that's a very important finding, I think, in the Hawthorne Effect. And I'm not sure whether you agree, but I think that's the basis of a lot of engagement that we talk about today, right? It's that many times we, as managers, right, many managers won't have the time on a daily basis. But I think even if you take a minute or two, and I think that's one of the things that we have done, is to build in little tools. Like, I mean, there's little apps like Happily Others that you have little tools where people can, you can ask some questions and people can answer, and then you can immediately reply back and say, hey, yeah, by the way, oh, that's how you feel. Okay, great. I feel the same. Or, you feel in a rut. Oh, goodness, what can I do? But even simple little things like that make a huge significant. Your thoughts on that?
Well, and you're right, and I know something about Leaderonomics. That you have partnered with another company that do this kind of app. It just happened. They're also based in Thailand, and I know them well. And so you're right. I think if the workplace stay as it is today, partly remote, part of thing, and especially for big company, they will need the technology to do the work that a human cannot do, to check on them, but in an intelligent way. So it has to be an AI based, not. And I think that's what you acquired recently, an AI based.
So that's one point, and I think that's very important, right? How do you create opportunities to listen, or at least the perception that employees feel that they are listened to, right? I think the other point that you made that was very interesting is that you see, when you observe, obviously things will be improved, right? I mean, obviously when you're under the microscope, you are like, you're performing, but it's very tiring and it's very painful, and we hate it, right? So employees hate being under 24/7 vigilance, right? So to say, yet at the same time, there needs to be some sort of ability to have some form of belief that you are being observed, right? I mean, so how do you balance that, right? Observation under vigilance, right? How do you do that, right?
I'll give you an example with, I got a 6 years old, okay? If I go to your bedroom now and I say like, what are you doing? That's one way, and that's a controlling tone, and that's only to control that she does something. It sounds like, just by saying that she might do something wrong, and I'm just checking she's not doing something wrong. There's another way to do that. I could go to your bedroom and I say like, hey, you doing okay? You need something? And that's also checking on people, but it's not suspicious on checking. So there's two ways, and you're still checking on them, but you not here to control, but here to say in any way you need something, or can I help? Absolutely. And I think the leaders of tomorrow need to do that. They need to be the guiding line to say like, how can I help you grow, to do your job better, but also to grow? What else do you need? Are you a photographer on the weekend? Oh my God, I love photography. Maybe you show me sometime. And you make a bond, and it's like, this is the way it has to be. It requires different skill sets from those managers. But
absolutely. And I think you make a very good point, right? So I mean, the first part about listening is that there are ways to use technology to enable us to feel listened, right? The second part is this: you need some observation, but what you need to do is pay attention to employees what they are doing, and pay attention to the results, right? Don't pay attention to the process. I think that's what we kind of sometimes forget. Is that we pay so much.
Do my job.
Exactly, right? And I think when we start paying attention to the results, employees get very excited and say, he's aware that I'm achieving this much. Versus, look, they are micromanaging the process. And I think that's a big differentiator where you want to observe, but you want to observe the impact and the results and not the process. So I think those will be, listening is key. Observation, not under vigilance, but observation for results, and then magnify that result, right? Even if it's the wrong one, right? So if they're not achieving, they're like, what's happening? Hold them accountable for the result. And I think that's key. Now, I think the third piece that I'm observing from your conversation with Andrea just now was that, I think that if you take some people who are really high performers and you put them in a group of employees that are non-performers, right? So employees who are usually productive can become unproductive when you're placing them in the wrong group, right? So there is and I think this is what we saw a bit in some of the Hawthorne experiments, right? Where you had two insubordinate, mediocre workers. They were replaced by two productive workers. And then suddenly they saw there was greater productivity in the whole team, right? So sometimes the importance is you need to really know who your people are. how do you put the right people in the right place in the right time and enable the organization to be able to somewhat be productive across the board, right?
And that would take HR. They would take HR to be more candidate profiling, more that and less on the skill. So we went from the hard skill to the soft skill. That's already
Absolutely.
good. But then there's more than soft skills. It's like your personality. Who are you? And are you a funny guy? Are you a person that every time they see you, people really want you? I work with people like this where they were so funny. That I was happy to go at work just because my colleague was fantastic, and so we were working and laughing at the same time. So if you just look at it, this guy don't work, they're only laughing. No, we were working as hard, but we were working in such a nice thing, and we stayed longer. We didn't look at the time,
And so I think those are great points. I'll make a couple more points that I picked up from the conversation. I think, and then maybe this is a question, right? Because I know this is an era where there's diversity is key, right? Not just women, but experience diversity, right? People who have differentiated experience are going to be key. And sometimes people who are different are made to feel unwanted, right? And we see, right? I mean, so much research says that the bigger the diversity of a team is, the more productive an environment is. And what are your thoughts in terms of how can organizations drive that? I mean, this is partly driven by what I think the Hawthorne Effect has shown us, is that when you have diversity of trying different ways of doing things, you start to see people react to it and get excited and change. And today's environment where change and pivoting is so essential, right? That diversity of experience is what drives it, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
And I have a sentence that I like very much that combine diversity, inclusion, and belonging, everything we talk about. And that sentence is like this: diversity is being invited to the party, so that you invite, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing like no one is watching.
Nice, love that. I think we should all hold on to that, right? I want to close this segment with just one other big insight is that I think what the Hawthorne experiment at least taught me, and what I'm hearing from you both, Patrick and Andrea, is that sometimes we make big things into like God, like this big initiative or this big thing or this big new product or this big change or this big transformation. But I think one of the things that the Hawthorne Effect really showed us is that the little things matter, right? It's these little things, right? It's that listening, it's that ability to connect, it's that ability to change that small, that little light bulb here, that observation, right? Hey, I didn't realize that you're a skier. Oh, I saw the photograph. Wow, I like to do that too, and And it means that little things that, and I think that we tend to worship big things and we tend to get excited by big things, but I think many times the little things really matter, and the little things make a huge difference.
I agree.
So I think, and you probably will have many other examples like that. I see based on your dance comment, Sashi's like, I often dance like no one else is watching, and then I don't get invited to the next party. So probably someone was watching you. But Patrick, your final thoughts on this whole Hawthorne Effect and the effect on the workplace.
Well, I think like what's happening with the pandemic, I think it's our chance as human beings to finally revive some skills, basic human skills that was lost into the productivity and the economic world. I think it's our chance to retake what made us human in the first place, how we survived through all so many wars and centuries and evolution, and remember and capitalize on that so we can go to the next step of our future. And when it comes and it passes with changing the workplace and the future of the workplace, and machines are coming very, very soon. We cannot compete with machine. Now the only card we have to play is our humanity, and if we play with our humanity, then we human will be good, and we will find a place together with the machine and other things. Productivity will be increased, and we will keep our dignity also. But
Fantastic.
Trying to become a machine is not what we want to be.
Fantastic. And we've been talking about the Hawthorne Effect. Andrea, your final thoughts on the Hawthorne Effect and its impact on the workplace? It's almost 100-year-old study, 90 plus years, I think. ago,
Yeah.
but it's still affecting us and it's still making a difference to how we engage, right?
Yeah, I think I want to nail on what Patrick mentioned just now, that he's not targeting research psychologists. I always believe that if there was a 50-50, it will be amazing, right? Research plus applied psychology, that will make the world so much better. And from the Hawthorne Effect, it showed us little points, and when we look into real life, these things are things that we can apply. So I mean, I'm saying this to more managers, young managers, employers who really want to keep their employees in check and make sure they're productive and stuff like that. It all begins with very little things that you can do right now. As simple as just texting your employee or your team member, hey, how are you doing today? Did you have a good weekend? Stuff like that is so important. I think that is at the core of our humanness, and I think that's super, super important to do right now, especially in virtual world and the pandemic and stuff like that. So those are my final thoughts, Roshan.
Fantastic. And just to quickly wrap it up, I think the little things matters a lot. Listening, it matters. I mean, just creating, using little tools to understand how to listen and so on. Observation, recognition matters a lot, right? I mean, people want to be observed, but they don't want to be observed. But what they don't want to be observed is, I don't want you to observe me while I'm working, doing the process, but I want you to know that I did something fantastic. And I want you to know that I want you to give me recognition when I succeed, right? And I think for leaders, yeah, absolutely, yeah, right, yeah. And I think for leaders, it's about understanding your people, putting the right people in the right group, building a group that is diverse. And at the end of the day, it's the small little rituals that you put in place that absolutely makes a difference. We're going to end with a quick little video on Happily, the app that I think Patrick was mentioning from our buddies from Thailand, and Budaya also from Malaysia. So we'll end with a short little thing on Happily. We'll see you next Wednesday, same time, same place. Patrick, we'd love to have you back again.
Thank you,
Patrick Bensen here from Thailand, who has joined us today on Psyched. And next episode, Psyched, where we learn about psychology and the workplace. Here's Happily. If you don't have it in your organization, check it out. It's an amazing tool that you can use to make that Hawthorne effect positively happen in your organization. Here's Happily.
Thank you, Roshan.